through human history, people have always migrated, either relocating or moving permanently to new places. However, irregular migration, which involves movement without necessary permits and procedure, has over time become a problem, especially as people move across borders for better lives. Now, despite these challenges, there is the clamor for safe, orderly and organized migration across the world. As the world observes the International Day on Migration, we shall take a critical look at the effectiveness of migration policies on Nigeria today. Welcome to the program. I am Anne JIBUNOH. Now with me in the studio to discuss migration for development is Charles Wanelo Anelo. He's the Assistant Director, Migration at the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Reverend Father Emeka Chris. Reverend Father Emeka Chris Obiezu. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
He is the coordinator, Civil Society Network on Migration and Development. Thanks again for joining us, gentlemen. Now, I'll start with you, Mr. Charles. What constitutes migration?
Yeah, migration, as we all know from your introduction, is an age-long thing that is as old as human existence. And it has to do with the movement of people from one geopolitical area to the other. And this can be internal movement or international movement. And when it is internal movement, it's just like moving from one city to the other within the same country. And it becomes international when you move from one country to other, crossing boundaries.
Okay, now, Reverend Father Chris, obviously you are on the ground. Why do people migrate?
There are various reasons why people migrate. When people migrate on their own choice, we call that an intended migration. And this could be for economic reasons. It could also be for other reasons of changing environment, for obvious reasons. But there are also other reasons which are not intended by the individual. And with this, we classify such migration as forced migration. This is when people are forced to leave their place, either by violence or disaster of any kind. So these are different types of migration that occur and why people actually move.
Okay, you are a regulator, you're someone who is in charge of this issue in Nigeria. Why, in your experience over the years, why do you think people migrate in the country and even outside?
Yeah, like my colleague has just said that one of the reasons can be economic, that is search for better welfare and to benefit the family and the rest of the family, and it can be forced. And when it means forced, it can be internally displaced person as a result of war, as a result of crisis, as a result of religious or whatever. And it can be as a stuff like recently now we are having the issue of climate change. So most of these things force people to move. But when it becomes for economic reason, it's done by choice. That choice is that maybe you want to move to better, of a greener pasture, as we used to say. And most of the time, it could be likened to maybe lack of infrastructure, or as some people may likely say that it's as a result of poverty.
We've heard of these two terms, regular and irregular migration. Yeah. Could you differentiate? He mentioned some of them, but I want you to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, let me start with irregular migration, which could be look to be like opposite of regular. Irregular migration is when you move without following the due process of movement. For example, you want to travel to a country that is not yours, and there are certain requirements of an immigration requirement that you need to satisfy. For example, you need to have passport, you need to have a visa, and the visas are classified. There are visas that permit you to work, and there are visas that permit you just to visit. And when you travel without those documents, the official document that are required by the destination countries, it constitutes irregular migration. That is what when now you are moving through irregular means. Like you have seen now that people moving through the desert, moving through the sea, and all those in order to do. Some of them may have procured some papers that may not they have the authenticity of taking them to another country.
Okay, Reverend Father, from the name of your NGO, you deal with migration and development matters. Now let's link the two. Where's the link?
Migration and development are interwoven in the sense that we see from the perspective of the migrants' contribution to national development. When migrants move to a new place, they contribute to the workforce. And so they provide labor to a new area that is in demanding labor. And when they generate income, they also pay taxes in those places. And because they are migrants, they also have families that are left in their countries of origin. So they do send things back. We call that remittances. In terms of economic remittances, they send money, which has been used to help to alleviate poverty in most cases, because this money has been used either to pay school fees, secure houses, as well as provide necessary means for families. And states also, countries also are harnessing this capital, this economic remittances by using what accrues from it also to do some development in the country. However, there are also social remittances. These people could also bring their knowledge back home and also bring some technical technology back home. And we see in most cases the diaspora coming back from their countries of destination back home to do some humanitarian services like medical care and all those. So, and in terms of development, the migrants have constituted a very large agents in development of countries and individual persons.
I'll still stay with you, Dr.
Yes.
Reverend Father Chris. Now, globally, let's look at migration policies globally.
Yes.
What's your assessment?
The global community has been dealing with the challenges of managing migration for a long time, and it has often been left on each government to deal with it the way they want. But the complexity of migration issue, the crisscrossing nature, the cross-cutting nature of migration issue makes it urgent that people come together to look for a cooperative way of relating to migration. So on the global scene, there are a series of processes that have been put in place to manage migration so that it will be a win-win for the country of origin, country of destination, and for the individual migrant. Recently, we just came back from Morocco last week, where the world gathered together to adopt the Global Compact for Safe, Regular, and Orderly Migration. This is a compact that has provided a framework upon which countries can now build their own national policies and national actions on how to manage migration. And the better thing, other good thing that compact has also brought to the effect of migration is it has also given a framework of cooperation between countries, cooperation between countries and states and non-state actors to ensure that it is a holistic approach that is being given to migration issue.
Now, let's take a look at Nigeria's policy. Let's zero it down home now. What's our policy? How active is this policy?
Yes, since 2015, when the National Migration Policy was adopted, the policy focuses on ensuring the protection of Nigerian migrants, ensuring that they are treated in dignity, wherever they may be, irrespective of their status, as well as ensuring that immigrants in Nigeria are equally properly taken care of. I could say, by my own assessment, that it is effective. Effective in the sense that migration, like he said, being a cross-cutting issue, is something that requires coordinated approach. And the policy, migration policy of Nigeria has made a provision for such coordinated approach by enshrining the the migration governance structure, which is bringing all the MDAs together in ensuring that the migration issues are being handled in a coherent and a coordinated approach. So with that now, issues of migration, every other agencies who are involved in the migration related, they know their responsibilities. And because they know their responsibilities, it tends to minimize the issues of interagency rivalry, which is one key thing that always bring down.
Getting to that, how do you deal with it? Because some of your functions overlap.
Yes, it may seem to overlap, but at the same time it is distant. For example, how we deal with it is that when the first thing we did as a National Commission for It, as a coordinating agency, is to establish a technical working group on migration. And that technical group comprises of MDAs that have a migration-related function, as well as civil society organizations, as well as academia and the private sector, and the international organizations. And within the migration policy, we have thematic areas. For example, we have 5 pillars that constitute the migration governance, and one pillar is a stakeholder forum on border management. And this has to do with the issues of border management, the issues of trafficking, the issues of smuggling, and ensuring the implementation of the ECOWAS protocol. And we have organizations whose responsibility centers there, who have different roles they play within that thematic area. And the lead agency is the Nigeria Immigration Service and the NAPTIP. So they coordinate that aspect and they report back to the technical working group. For example, also we have a forced migration and return and reintegration, which falls within the ambit of the National Commission for Refugees. And that forced migration has to do with the issue of refugees management and the issue of IDPs. And also we have a diaspora engagement that has to do with issues of diaspora and is being coordinated by now presently by NNVS, that is Nigeria National Volunteer Service, and also being assisted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we have labor migration being headed by Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment. And so with these thematic areas, every agency must have a specific role they play in those areas, and we are all classified according to that. So we know our roles and we know our responsibilities, and we come together within the framework of the technical working group to now a kind of evaluate and assess our operations. Now,
before we go on our break, Reverend Father, you are a member of the civil society. How has it been working with all these groups, government groups?
Like he likely said, the technical working group, or the entire migration governance architecture of the country, provides a space for state and non-state actors. And oftentimes people see civil society and government at different angles. But we've seen from the productive advocacy we do, we see that to get policies implemented or even developed, you need a cooperation, and that cooperation comes in terms of finding a middle ground where parties could relate and then discuss substantial issues. So the technical working group has provided that space. So we also organize civil societies within the thematic areas, so that various civil societies that are working on migration related areas have their own input into the technical working group, focusing on their own areas of competence. So, I mean, of course, civil society is not government, and they don't speak like government. So sometimes we don't like what they say, but our presence there is always to sting them to consciousness that irrespective of every other thing, it is not politics first, it is not money second. It is first human beings, it is second human beings, it is third human beings. So all these things come to that point.
Okay, I'll stop you there. We must, well, the program is Nigeria Today, and we have been discussing migration for development. Now, let's go to the streets to get the perception of Nigerians on this issue.
To turn migration around for national development cannot be overemphasized, because if you look at the nation, I mean the youth of the nation, they are well-doing. especially those who have gone to school. If you look at the world, you will discover that Nigerians are doing well abroad. If you talk of especially car designer, the best car designer in the world today is a Nigerian. If he will come back to his country, Nigeria, and the nation, the country will empower him, then it will serve as a means of developing the economic of Nigeria.
I guess in 21st century, we will all need people around us. It helps our economy. Migration is very vital, to boost our economy, because the outsiders, when they come with resources, and then they can employ our people and then help the economy prosper.
If there is a proper infrastructure put in place for the youth, if there's an enable environment for them to work and earn a living, I don't think there will be a need for them going outside the country just to sing for greener pasture.
Is to make the all necessary thing available for people, because if everything is fine in this country, you will not see people fighting to travel, even endangering their life.
Respondents there sharing their views on the migration for development. And now back to our guest in the studio. I'll start with you, Reverend Father. Migrants have rights. How can these rights be protected? First of all, what are the rights, briefly, and how can they be protected?
The rights the migrants have is not different from the right of any other individual. Their rights are simple. First and foremost, the basic human rights of every human person. So what is being advocated for when we advocate for migrants' rights is that migrants should be accorded all the necessary rights that they deserve as human beings, irrespective of their status. This is where it becomes tricky, because a migrant in regular status may ordinarily be receiving all those necessary things like facilities, services like health, education, and every other thing in the country of destination. But when you are within an irregular status, it is difficult most times, because first you are not accessible, you can't access those resources, and secondly, the host government perceive you from a very negative perspective. So, but in advocating for that rights, we put forth that caveat that these persons are human beings first. Irrespective of the status they find themselves, they should be given that. So, for instance, if somebody is in Nigeria from another country, that person is sick, he needs medical care, and that person should get it. A child who is in this place should also have access to education, as every other child would. If we go back to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it states that every child has the right to education. So when we advocate for the rights of migrants, we simply say there is no separate right for migrants. It is human rights that migrants are supposed to enjoy.
Now, Charles Anelu, you've heard of the saying that the grass is greener, or rather appears greener on the other side. Many migrants go through tortuous journeys, across the Atlantic, Mediterranean, the Sahara and all that, to get to these supposed greener pasture. Now, how, from your experience, how have these journeys turned out from the reports you've been getting?
One of the deceptive action that is leading people to move is this issue of greener pastures, and sometimes it could be likened to lack of information and awareness. And you discover that the place they think that there is a greener pasture, they may not know that those countries have their own challenges, and they are suffering, and even most of their citizens don't even have work. However, the point is that what we as the Commission is doing now is trying to change that perception of people now thinking that that is greener in Nigeria. So we want to change the perception to make people to begin to have faith in Nigeria and begin to ask questions and to be better informed. So because migration, you cannot stop migration. Whether it is greener over there or it is greener over here, you cannot stop migration. But what we are saying and what we are trying to do is that if you must migrate, you must do that as a choice and not as a necessity. And that means that doing it by choice means that you have to follow the regular process in doing that.
Okay, Reverend Father, what's to say?
Yes, I just really want to jump into that. First, I want to correct the impression that migration today is not mostly irregular migration. The high percentage of migration happen in the regular routes. In other words, people use the right channels to get to where they are going to. But however, there's a significant number that use the irregular means to migrate. And the context of the greener pasture elsewhere, as Charles likely said, migration cannot be stopped. If the country here is all well good, people can still move if they want to on the choice of moving. But I think responding to the greener pasture and the urge to move, would also ask, why would we not want to stay here? It is not sufficiently okay to say this is a bad lack of information. Of course, I met somebody who said, I'm ready to return if I can get this. And he returned, and he couldn't get that. So, and where he was not getting every other thing, but at least the security of his life was assured. He can be assured of daily sustenance, but he can't find it where he calls his home. So this brings us to push and pull factor that are involved in migration. For Nigeria, for instance, as a country, to encourage the citizens to stay here, you necessarily have to put things right. The graduating students do not have to roam the streets to be able to get a job. They don't have to do any other thing extra or know somebody to get a job. If you are doing business, you must be sure of your security. Now, let me give you a practical example. We are on the Christmas season. If you look at the scenario, things have changed. You know, many police on the streets, block by block. And then prices of things have skyrocketed. And there are so many acts that actually tell people, really, but you go somewhere else. This is a season where people are actually trying to do things to make it lighter and better for other persons.
But I have to come in here.
Yes.
We notice from reports we heard some time back, many of these people are maltreated. They are sold as slaves. They get into all kinds of, they're exploited.
Yes.
I don't really understand why. Why should people continue migrating?
Again, hit at that point. Why would people still migrate? We had testimonies of somebody who had undergone such inhuman treatment and came back and still went back.
What do you say to that?
Because the things that could make her stay here was not available. It is not just enough to say, it is all, I mean, if you stick your ground here. Of course, I believe in Nigeria. If you stick your ground and do the right thing, you'll get it. But you keep doing it and it is not working. And the worst is, you see that the resources that are left for you to be able to do it, one or two persons are amassing that and making you a slave to them. It is even worse to be a slave in your own place by somebody who you have purposely by yourself elected to go and help you govern your issues, to put you in that direction. So, but for those who use irregular means, maltreatment of people who are under forced labor, all these come under such things we've advocated for rights of migrants, and we fight against that.
Now, you want to say something, but you take that with this. You are in the forefront, your agency, the Immigration Service and NAPTIP. What are you doing to stop people from getting involved in scenarios like this? Somebody was, like he just told us, somebody was maltreated, sold as a slave, came back to Nigeria and still went back to that same place. I mean, how do you explain this? Well,
first of all, let me refer back to the issue of ignorance. I have that confidence, and it is everywhere, particularly with this present administration, that a lot of programs are being set on ground that can empower youth and young Nigerians into being productive. Everything is not about being a civil servant, so you can do something to be on your own. And most people are not even taking advantage of those programs of the government that is now laid on ground that is being done. For example, if it is not ignorant and there are other developed countries, they still migrate. Are they migrating because there is no infrastructure in their place? Are they migrating because there is no work in their place? It's because migration is inherent. It's something that you cannot stop. So, but in our own case, if people are saying that it's because this is not put in place and all these things, how about others who are still there and they're still living their life? So that is why we are talking about having faith in our country. We stay behind and work it out ourselves and make it the way the other countries are. Like our president, like they said the other day, that we are here to assist all Nigerians. But if you insist on taking the risk of the desert and all this, it means that you want to endanger your life and all those. How could somebody be tortured and treated in and they still want to go? So something is wrong there somewhere, and I cannot just blame it to the infrastructure. And there are those who have gone once and they said no. And let me tell you that the Nigerian government is going further to ensure that even those who went and saw the danger and came back, they give them a soft landing by providing some reintegration program for them so that they can now stay. But some people, after even receiving the reintegration program, which we do in collaboration with other international agencies like IOM, they will even still abandon it and leave. So the point now is that it's still that wrong perception that we are talking about, now which we are working hard to.
Let's look at internal policy. Okay, quickly, let's look at internal policy. How is it going to help address internal crisis, especially in the Northeast and where we have internal crisis, regarding migration issues, refugee issues?
Well, if you are referring to the issues of IDPs, yes, then internal displaced persons, I would say that we have a policy that has not been put on ground, which Mr. President graciously said that will soon be adopted, and that is the issue of IDP policy. In that policy, which incorporated the Kampala Convention, is a kind of stipulates the protection safeguards for people who find themselves displaced for no choice of their own. And that policy equally is a framework that will provide, because the issue of the IDP policy, the management cannot be done by one agency.
Certainly it cannot be done by one agency, and I must stop here because we are completely out of time. I must thank you, Mr. Charles Nwayanelu Anelu, Assistant Director, Migration at the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And I must also thank you, Reverend Father Chris Obiezu. Okay, he's the coordinator, Civil Society Network on Migration and Development.
Thank you.
Well, that's it on this edition of Nigeria Today. But before we go, we will give you our website where you can take a look at editions of this program. That's www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. My name is Anne JIBUNOH. Thanks for your time.